Launius today, coming to you from South Carolina. My new house just moved this year. And I'm going to talk about a new game going to be coming out from 8 Summit here in the near future. And it's called Gods of Adventure. And it's basically a game where I had the idea that it'd be fun if everybody could control a same group of adventurers by playing cards from their hands and representing the gods that kind of influence them. So what we're going to do here in a few minutes is take you inside over to my prototype area and show you what the game looks like, at least in prototype form, and show you a little bit about how it's played. But I think you'll find it as an interesting, fun game that plays in about 45 minutes. It offers variety of play. It's a game where you do want to win it, but you have to work together a little bit so that you get through the dungeon area that your adventurers are trying to explore. But in the end, whoever has the most points from the gold that they've gathered, the treasures that they've gathered, and from the collecting, because it has a set collecting element in terms of the gems that you're collecting also at the end, will be declared the winner. Unless you fail the dungeon. If your group fails the dungeon, then it's he who's collected the lace that will end up winning it. So there's a little push-pull between the players in the process. Let's go take a look over in my prototype area and you can see the game a little bit closer up. Okay, here we are in my prototype playtest room, and I'm going to show you a little bit at least of the prototype for Gods of Adventure. Make sure you know a little bit about what's in the game and how the game is basically being played. What you're going to do is you're going to build a dungeon. You can play different sizes, but the primary size is going to be, you're going to draw from your deck of cards. I've already built a dungeon here, but you'll put 3 level 1s in, you'll put 2 level 2s in, and then you'll put 1 of the level 3s in. And you've got a large number of cards, so you can constantly build different kinds of dungeons. So obviously the further you go, the more dangerous the dungeon is going to get. But which is important because the players will be building up their powers and skills from the treasures that they gather from the upper levels. That'll help them as they move down to the lower levels. Along with that, each player will get a deck of cards. There's a yellow deck of cards, there's a blue deck of cards, there's a green deck of cards, and a red deck of cards. And each one of these decks are identical in terms of what's in them. And they represent the players will represent the gods and how they're influencing the exact same characters. So inside the deck, you're going to have different dungeon type characters. You can have the classic barbarian, you can have the wizard, you're going to have the rogue, and then a number of others that make up the group. And everybody's decks will be the same. You will represent a god. I've only got one of the cards here because we keep making changes to the gods, but we finally come to a conclusion on which gods will be included in the base game. Every player's deck of cards will have 2 characters of each of the dungeon characters in it, and they represent the classic dungeon characters. So you will have things like the bard and the barbarian, you'll have the halfling and the wizard, and you'll be playing these into the dungeon. And what you'll be doing as the gods is taking control of these various characters as you play the game. So someone may already have a barbarian in play, and if you want to play a barbarian, you would place your barbarian directly on top of that barbarian, which means your god is now in control of those. Each of the cards will have little things written that kind of go with their god on them, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with gameplay, but certainly is fun to quote as a god as you put your cards in play. And they'll be trying to complete the dungeon and move through it. Each dungeon will have something they have to achieve. In other words, this one here is a level 1. It's a pack of rats, and they need to get 16 wounds on this pack of rats for them to advance. The card will also show that available here, because the rats don't have a lot of treasure, will be 2 gold bags. So 2 gold bags will be taken from surplus and placed into play face down. Gold bags will have different values. Gold in the course of the game, the more of it you have, at the end, the player who has the most gold will get bonus points. The player second most will get bonus points. Third most will get bonus points. So those will become part of what you're trying to collect. It'll also identify if any treasures down here. In this case, there's 2 treasures. So there'll be 2 treasure tokens that come into play, which will represent more than 1 treasure card to be gained in the course of the game, and that'll be available at the end if you succeed at defeating this particular dungeon. So as the play goes on, players will be playing cards from their hands, and we're going to get a close-up, I think, at the table as we do this. But a player will choose a card from their hand of 3 that's drawn from their own private deck and place it into play. So if I was starting out at this dungeon, I might, for example, play the halfling right off the bat. He's not very powerful. He does 1 melee wound, which is identified by his card, so he's not going to do a lot of wounds to him. But more importantly is, his special ability is he gains me 1 experience point. So I immediately collect 1 experience point and add it to my pool of experience points. So the halfling's gone into play. I've collected my experience point. I place it over here. At this point, what we look at and we see is the dungeon will fight back. And we can see on the dungeon card itself that this dungeon has attack of 2 dice. It also shows how many heroes have to be defeated for us to fail this particular dungeon. And it shows that we need 16 wounds for us to advance past it safely. Any other quotes on here may give specific, and in this case it simply is flavor text. Bloated rats emerge from the darkness in the torrent swarm of gleaming red eyes and needle-sharp teeth. So hasn't got any special rules that apply, so we put that in play. Basically, to end my turn, the rat pack will attack. I roll the dice. In this case, they have 2 dice. And I check. I need a 6 for him to take a wound, as identified here. Now, one of the things I need to say, you're looking at all prototype material here. These will all be custom dice that we're going to be looking at once the game comes out, and you'll be able to see those on the Kickstarter itself. But for this purpose, I'm using my original prototype. So no wounds were done. The player will now draw 1 red card to put back into their hand, and their turn's over. Now we're up to the God of Wealth, who is the yellow player, and they are looking at their hand, and they currently have a wizard, a rogue, and a barbarian in their hand. They choose to play the rogue, not really threatened by the giant rats at this point. They put the rogue in play, and the rogue says that when they put this into play, they can either attack or they can steal a bag of gold. Now they could attack for 2 damage if they wanted to, because that's their damage that they do. And you'll notice we have skills over here. I haven't talked about those, but some of the encounters require them to use skills. So heroes can only use the skills that they have. But they will now swipe one of the gold bags. They won't show it to the others, but they end up getting 1 point worth of gold. They'll add that over to their game area, keep it face down to be only revealed at the end of the game. They now will roll the dice for the dungeon, and they get a 6. Now, both of the characters out there require a 6 to take a wound, so we put a wound token on each one. Now, the rogue takes 3 before it gets knocked out. They don't get slain, they only get knocked out. And the halfling takes 3 to get knocked out. So keep in mind, if 3 people get knocked out on this adventure, we lose it. So we're going to need somebody to step up and start hitting some things. They're going to draw a yellow card at the end, and we go to the green player. You can see where the board sits right now. We have 5 heroes that are in play. The sorceress is in play by herself for the blue player. The red player now controls the wizard, which was originally played by the green player. The red player controls the halfling. The blue player now controls the rogue. And the barbarian was originally controlled by the yellow player, now is controlled by the green player. You can see the wounds. The halfling only takes 1 more wound before he becomes knocked out. The barbarian can take 5, so he's in good shape. So they've managed to put, and these are being used instead of tokens, these simply show that there's been 10 wounds put on the pack of giant rats. We need 6 more. And so we're up to the red player. And the red player decides that he's going to go ahead and play the rogue again, which gives him control of the middle 3 characters. There's no gold for him to steal, so he's basically going to attack for 2, which means he's going to add 2 wounds, taking this to 12, and then roll the dice. This time he comes up with a 6 and a 2. So with a 6, we see that the halfling gets knocked out actually, so we end up placing a knockout token on that one. Being knocked out means you get less experience at the end, but you will still get experience if you're the top character. We can remove the wounds from him now. The rogue also takes a wound because a 6 hits them. And we can see that a 2 also attacks the barbarian. So he now has 3 wounds on him. So, and the barbarian is very powerful in combat. He takes a lot of wounds because of the way he fights. But the more barbarians in play, the more damage that they do. So the red player would now draw a card at the end of their turn. Yellow player now looks at their hand. They could either play a wizard, a sorceress, or the elf. They decide that they want to do automatic damage no matter what, so they will add the elf to the play. So the elf would get added to the line. I'm going to add it beneath it here so you can see it better on camera. Normally be added right out to the side where the players can see. And the elf's going to end up doing 2 wounds, okay? So now we've got it up to 14. 2 more wounds would end up slaying the giant rats and winning. At the end of the elf's turn, the elf will roll the dice. and the elf gets a 5 and a 1 on their attack. So we look across here and we see that the wizard has taken his second wound, one more and he would be knocked out. We see that the 1 will end up putting another wound on the barbarian. He's 1 from being knocked out. And the elf has the potential of being wounded, but the elf's special ability is quickness. Each time the elf would take a wound, roll a die. On an even number, the elf dodges the wound. Whoever controls the elf would do that. So since I control the elf as the yellow player, I would roll the dice. I got an even number, so he does not take a wound. So the heroes have won this particular dungeon. The pack of rats have been defeated. So what's going to happen next is experience is going to be rewarded to the top cards, to the gods of the top card. So if we look across here, blue has only 1 card on top. So they will end up getting 2 experience for that particular card. It'd be handed to them. Along with the 1 they got earlier for their rogue, they end up with 3 at the end of this round. The red will get 2 points, 2 experience points for the wizard, 1 experience point for their knocked out halfling. So they'll pick up 3 off of this. And of course they also got from the halfling, they ended up picking a point also for that. If we look at the green, green is going to get 4 points. They've got 2 for the rogue and 2 for the barbarian, so that'll give them 4 experience points. And then yellow, unfortunately, only has 1 character up, the elf, and they're going to get 2 points for that. I should note here, if you have multiple cards on any hero line, you get an extra bonus point. So if you had 1 under and 1 on top, you would get 3 points. If you had 2 under, you would still get 1 point for at least having 2 cards in that particular line. Experience points are used in the course of the game to buy treasure, and now we come to that point. We're going to loot. The Kickstarter itself is actually going to be a game. In 8 summits, set this up so that you will go through various summits. You will start with a summit that's full of various types of undead. Consider yourself the adventurers of a fantasy adventure type thing. You'll make decisions along the way collectively that will turn you in different directions. And through that process, you will gain different rewards that will be added to the game. And the choices that you collectively make will move you further and further up the summits until ultimately you arrive at 8th summit. You also have the opportunity to hit different magical portals that can move you back to different places so you can capture rewards that have been set up along the way. So hopefully it's going to be a lot of fun for you. It's going to provide a lot of new things for the game that can be added, because although the game has plenty of dungeon cards, it has plenty of everything that you need to play the game, it's always good to have a few more things to add more and more variety. So we think you're going to like this game, and hopefully you're going to like the Kickstarter that goes with it.